Hey guys, I'm Beth. This is Remark. Today we're going to talk about the Booktube Prize Semifinals. Hey guys, I'm Beth. I'm going to start off this video with a lame apology. I meant to put this video out during the weekend and came down with a nasty tooth infection, so I've been writhing in agony, and I'm just now rejoining the land of the living with a barking dog. So, without further ado, I am going to tell you how I voted on the Booktube Prize semifinals. But first, an explanation. What is the Booktube Prize? Well, it is a contest put together by Robert over at Barter Hordes. Basically, he gets the previous year's best books, pits them up against each other in chunks of 6, and then divides those up amongst a lot of us booktubers, and then has us rank them from 1st place to 6th place in the order that we enjoyed them, and then takes the winnings from that and then moves them on to the next rounds. Completely subjective? Yeah. I mean, what book prize isn't completely subjective? Of course we look for things like quality and stuff like that, but really what it comes down to is individual taste. I am going to get right down to it and tell you how I voted. So, number 6, I voted for West by Carys Davies. I should preface this by saying that at this point in the competition, every one of these books is good. They're all excellent. They all deserve to be there. I don't think there was a stinker in the bunch, but West was not my favorite. It's been labeled as an allegory for the American frontier experience. It follows this girl whose father thinks that there are these giant animals, possibly like dinosaurs, and he just takes off in the middle of the new American West to go find them. I voted for it for number 6 because it didn't seem to really go anywhere. It kind of got to the end of the story and it reminded me of one of those, you know, where you have the warbling music and there is the lady in danger lying on the train tracks, tied to the train tracks with evil people in the distance going and meanwhile there's this Dudley Do-Right kind of character racing towards her on a horse, and you keep wondering, is he going to get there in time? Is he going to get there in time? No, of course, that's just a comparison. That's not literally what happened in the book, but that's what it kind of seemed like. It seemed like Bess was the proverbial girl on the train tracks, and this Native American boy, who they called Old Woman from a Distance, was racing towards her, and you kept wondering if he was going to get to her before disaster struck. No, nothing even really happens from it.
Really?
Yeah. So that's kind of what got me about West, was the ending. It just seemed to kind of fizzle out. For number 5, I voted Washington Black by Edugyan. This is a book that really had me captivated in the first part and then lost me. Still a very good book overall. It basically follows a boy who is a slave on a plantation, horrible, horrible conditions, and then a man comes who kind of has like a savior complex and wants to take him away from all of that. In the meantime, they're building this sort of fantastical flying machine. It sounds kind of like a hot air balloon, but with more, like it has paddles or oars or something like that. And so I thought that maybe there would be this sort of supernatural element to it somehow. And then it didn't really do anything. I mean, they took it for a ride at one point, but it wasn't really pivotal in the story itself. It was more about the relationship between the boy and the man, and then that kind of disappeared too, so it was kind of about how the boy made his way through life from there. So, I don't know. It wasn't a bad book. It's just the first half of the book seemed to hold so much emotion, so much tension and promise, with this hint of this little supernatural thing that might mean bigger things. And then it just kind of went nowhere. It was like a hot air balloon to nowhere. I mean, not that the kid's life was nowhere or nothing, that's not the case, but it seemed like the promise that was set up in the book didn't quite come to fruition. So, good book, but number 5 in the Booktube Prize. For number 4, I voted The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, and I loved this book so much. I was a little bit skeptical going into it because I had recently finished Circe by Madeline Miller. It seems like everybody loved Circe, and I left that book feeling kind of So I was a little bit nervous to go into another mythology-based book such as this one. But it followed this story so closely, so emotionally, and so critically that I just was so pulled into it, so pulled in. It's very hard at some parts when you hear about the horrors that are being wrought upon some of the people. There's murder, there's rape. It's not an easy book to read because it has so many horrific things going on in it, but to hear the other side of this story, you know, you hear about the mythology of these great warriors like Achilles or Zeus or all sorts of people. Shrek! But you don't hear as much about the women. It's pretty darn satisfying to hear the woman's side of the story. Maybe satisfying isn't quite the right word because it's not really a happy thing to read, all the things that happen and her place in society and how pretty much unless the men let her out, she just has to kind of stay behind the closed doors. It was just such a good book. I really enjoyed that story. The number 3 book that I voted for was Fruit of the Drunken Tree by Ingrid Rojas Contreras. I've talked many times about how much I love Fruit of the Drunken Tree, so I'll just go over it in the most sparing of details. It follows these 2 girls living disparate lives in Pablo Escobar's Colombia. One of the girls lives in a gated upper middle class neighborhood. They're pretty well to do. They have a maid. The other girl is the maid. It's just a very, very dangerous place that they were living in. The thing that was so sad for me was the lower class, economic class girl had really no chance of getting out of that situation. She tried. There were some situations where she tried to help herself. She tried to help others. It always ended in disaster and put her just right back where she was, right back where she was stuck. It was almost like her economic status was her prison, and it's just really unfortunate and sad that it was like that. Jumping right into number 2 was A Ladder to the Sky by John Boyne, and oh how I loved this book. It follows a man who is basically a climber, one of those climbers who climbs at the cost of everyone around him. Another hard read. This round was full of books that were not necessarily easy to read. They were pretty difficult to consume, but they were also important to consume. Very interesting setup. So, A Ladder to the Sky is one that I don't want to give you very many details because to do that would be to give away the book. Do yourself a favor. Go into it blind. Don't read any of the synopses. Don't read any of that stuff because it might give away the book. It might have spoilers inadvertently because I feel like to know anything about this book is to kind of ruin the delicious horribleness of it. So, just pick it up, read it, and then be shocked and awed by what lays within the pages. All right, the final book. The final one I'm going to talk about is The Great Alone by Kristin Hannah. That's the one I voted for number 1. It was hard because I loved A Ladder to the Sky so much and all of the intrigue that laid within that I kind of thought that it would be an instant number 1 for me, and then I got into The Great Alone and just fell completely in love with the book. Another difficult one because it follows an abusive man and his family as they move off the grid to Alaska. You can check out my other Booktube video in which I talk about it more in depth. They moved to Alaska to get off the grid and basically give him a new start. He was a POW in the Vietnam War. This is set in the late 1970s going forward, and he is just still kind of a broken man from that. And his wife loves the crap out of him, refuses to leave him, and their 13-year-old daughter is just kind of there along for it. And so they go to Alaska thinking that it's going to be the redemption that they need. They don't realize just how hard the winters are, just how hard it is to live out there. And so they just have a really hard time with the elements and then with the father himself. So it's kind of that duality of man versus man and man versus nature kind of hitting this girl all at once, that it's just a really hard thing to survive, a really hard thing to get past. Gets a little bit treacly in the end, but I still really enjoyed the book. So, The Great Alone, Kristin Hannah. I'm really excited to watch more of these videos and see how other people voted. I love the different opinions and different views and different rankings that we bring to all of these books for many different reasons, which makes a contest like this so much fun because it's completely subjective and we all have our own biases. I'm sure that at least some of you are probably watching this and saying, what are you thinking? Why did you vote that way? That's stupid. And I welcome those discussions. It's really fun to have a book discourse. So bring it on. Let me have it in a kind and respectful way. Thanks again for watching. As always, I really appreciate it, and I will catch you all next time. Bye.